It was a war of sudden ambushes and desperate last stands. A war that pitted neighbor against neighbor, race against race, and ideology against ideology. This wasn't just a fight for land. It was a fight for the soul of a nation. And a fight that Hollywood, for all its love of historical epics, largely chose to ignore. Why? Because the Rhodesian Bush War was brutal, and it left no easy heroes, only deep, unhealing scars. From 1964 to 1979, in the heart of southern Africa, a small landlocked nation became the crucible where the last fires of colonialism met the rising tide of African nationalism. This is the story of Rhodesia and the Bush War. After World War II, Africa began to change. One by one, the old colonies started slipping out of Britain's hands. From Ghana to Kenya and even Zambia, they were all gone. But down south, in a place called Southern Rhodesia, time seemed to stand still. While other nations raised new flags, Rhodesia held on to the old one. Why? Because a small group of white settlers believed that they were the ones keeping civilization alive in Africa. And the Prime Minister of Rhodesia, Ian Smith, believed it even more than anyone else. Smith wasn't some crazed dictator. He was calm, confident, and absolutely convinced he was right. In 1965, he declared independence from Britain. It was called the Unilateral Declaration of Independence, or UDI. Instantly, these shocking declarations sent ripples across the world. Immediately, the white world called it illegal. Britain imposed sanctions, and the UN followed suit with condemnations. But Smith didn't care. He said he'd rather live 1,000 years of darkness than surrender his country to black majority rule. Meanwhile, beyond the cities and the white-owned farms, a storm was brewing. Two new movements, ZANU and ZAPU, rose from the townships in the bush. They wanted independence too, but not Smith's version. They wanted real freedom. They might have been different tribes with different ideologies, but they had the same goal. And as the 1960s went on, one truth became clear. Rhodesia's future would be written in fire. Before we move on to the next section, please don't forget to subscribe if you've liked the video so far. Chapter 2, Phase 1, Whispers in the Bush. By the mid-1960s, Rhodesia was standing alone, surrounded by a continent that wanted it gone. The white minority government had the guns, the planes, the training, and the confidence that they could outlast anyone. But while they looked outward, they couldn't see what was happening right under their noses. Young men were crossing borders into Tanzania, Zambia, and later, Mozambique. They weren't soldiers yet, just farmers, students, miners, and all of them were angry and tired of being ruled. Suddenly, they came back as guerrilla fighters, and they called themselves Zanla and Zipra. At first, their attacks were small, from ambushes on police patrols to sabotage on power lines, and possibly an occasional assassination. To the Rhodesian government, they were terrorists, but to the villagers, they were heroes. Sometimes. The army responded with precision, aggression, and firepower, not because they knew what they were doing, but because they were afraid. Helicopters swooped low over the trees, dropping elite units into the thick bush. The Rhodesians became known for their fast, brutal, and efficient tactics called Fire Force operations. Here's how they worked. Fire Force operations unfolded in 3 swift phases: contact, encirclement, and destruction. It began with contact, a sighting, a radio call, a whisper from the bush. Within minutes, helicopters thundered into the sky. The K-car gunship led the charge, spotting targets and unleashing its 20mm cannon while troop carriers followed close behind. Then came encirclement. Guided from above, soldiers were dropped into a wide ring, cutting off every escape route. Paratroopers sealed the exits. Radios buzzed. and the bush became a cage. Finally, destruction. The K-car hammered the tree line as ground troops closed in. The firefights were short, brutal, and precise, and the fight was usually over in minutes. When the smoke cleared, soldiers gathered weapons and intelligence before disappearing back into the sky. And as the decade closed, one thing became clear. The war had outgrown Rhodesia's borders, and there was no turning back. Chapter 3, Phase 2, Engulfing. By the early 70s, the war had changed. What began as scattered ambushes and raids had turned into something far bigger. In 1972, Mozambique won its independence from Portugal. Overnight, Rhodesia lost a quiet ally and gained a dangerous new neighbor. The new Marxist government opened its borders to Zanilla guerrillas, giving them safe passage, training camps, and supply lines. So this left Rhodesia exposed to the east. In the west, Zipra, backed by the Soviets and operating out of Zambia, grew stronger too. They were better armed, better trained, and had access to real weaponry. Everything from RPGs to landmines, even anti-air missiles. Suddenly, Rhodesia found itself surrounded. To fight back, the Rhodesian security forces doubled down. Fire Force teams struck deep into the bush. Special units like the Selous Scouts and SAS carried out covert raids across borders, slipping into Mozambique and Zambia to sabotage camps and assassinate leaders. On paper, Rhodesia was still winning. Their soldiers were elite and disciplined, but numbers didn't win wars alone. The guerrillas had something the Rhodesians didn't: momentum. Every time a village was bombed, every time a civilian was caught in the crossfire, more young men joined the cause. By 1976, it wasn't just a bush war anymore. It was a regional conflict, fueled by Cold War politics, African nationalism, and a growing belief that Rhodesia's time was running out. Chapter 4, Operation Vanity. By 1979, Rhodesia was running out of options. The war had spilled across borders, and the guerrillas were getting stronger. So Operation Vanity began. The military decided to strike deep into Mozambique, targeting bridges, supply depots, and transport routes. Canberra bombers roared across the skies, supported by Hawker hunters slicing through clouds, dropping bombs on Zanila's lifelines. Every strike was executed with textbook skill, a show of Rhodesia's military genius. But there was a problem. Every success in the air was met with condemnation abroad, and the Rhodesian diplomacy was crumbling noticeably. Even though Operation Vanity could destroy supply lines, it couldn't slow the world turning against Rhodesia. Chapter 5, Operation Uric. Want to understand the world better? Start with history and subscribe to our channel. Operation Uric was carried out in a single week and lasted from September 1st to 7th, 1979. It was one of the largest and costliest cross-border raids of the Rhodesian Bush War, striking deep into Mozambique to cripple Zanilla supply lines and destroy the fortified headquarters at Mapai. Despite some success, the operation proved to be a costly climax. At Mapai, troops faced a determined, well-equipped enemy who stood their ground against the air mobile assault. Then, disaster struck when an SAAF Puma helicopter was hit by an RPG-7, killing all 17 men aboard, marking the highest single loss of life for the Rhodesian security forces in the entire conflict. To make matters worse, the bodies could not be recovered, and shortly after, a second helicopter was taken down. This tactical setback and the unprecedented loss of life, despite high enemy casualties, convinced many veterans and commanders that the war was unwinnable. On top of that, international pressure, especially the threat of South Africa withdrawing support, intensified. Uric was the last, most violent gasp of a dying regime, forcing the insurgents to the negotiating table at Lancaster House shortly thereafter. Chapter 6, Lancaster House Agreement. With no way out, the leaders of Rhodesia and the guerrilla fighters sat at the negotiating table in London's Lancaster House. For the first time, Smith's government, ZANU and ZAPU, faced each other across the room. To say that the conversation was tense would be an understatement. Threats were thinly veiled, and every gesture loaded with meaning. What was supposed to be an agreement of a few weeks turned into months. Every paragraph of the agreement was hammered out under the watchful eyes of Britain and the world. Eventually, in the end, they agreed upon a ceasefire. In 1980, the ballots replaced bullets. Elections under British supervision brought Robert Mugabe to power, and the nation of Zimbabwe was born. For some, it was liberation. For others, surrender. However, the promise of freedom from colonial rule came at a very heavy cost. Mugabe was praised for promoting education and racial reconciliation, but his regime gradually became authoritarian. Land reforms in the 2000s seized white-owned farms, leading to economic collapse, food shortages, and hyperinflation. And when the trillion-dollar bill was introduced, all sorts of corruption became rampant. Do you think Mugabe crippled the Zimbabwean economy? Or was the country beyond saving due to colonial influence and white rule? Let us know in the comments below. Here's another video history buffs enjoyed watching. Goodbye for now.